Welcome to Deal Shredders.
We are your hosts, David and Greg.
We are local Nashville investors, cash buyers, and real estate agents who love to analyze your deals.
Hey, fellow listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you have not already, please check us out on Facebook, like us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or listen to us on Anchor or any other podcast means. We would love if you would leave us a review or some stars if you like what you hear. You listeners are what make our podcast grow, so please don't forget to tell your friends.
Welcome to Deal Shredders episode number 7. Today we have Grant Hammond, who is an award-winning real estate agent with a career sales of just over $425 million. He is a current member of the GNR Legislative Committee, and he is fighting for property owners' rights, and specifically, we are talking today about 3 bills in the Davidson County, Nashville area that will affect everyone's property value, specifically short-term rentals. Stay tuned.
All right, we got Deal Shredders episode 7 finally here. This is a major day for Nashville. There's a lot going on with we have 3 major bills. I'm just going to wait for a couple people to get on here before we get started. I believe we are live. Oh, we got one person on. Perfect. So we know it's working. So we've got 3 major bills about short-term rentals that could affect pretty much anybody in Davidson County. And, property values, income. This is not real estate investors. These are normal homeowners that work every day.
There were a few teachers and stuff that came out last night that were like...
there was a huge meeting last night,
We scraped up 2-3 years worth of part-time work, whatever, to get this money to invest in our properties in order to have residual.
And the city pays them $30,000 a year, and they find a way to make it work, and then they take it away. So guys, so we're here to talk about the 3 bills for short-term rentals. I know there's a lot of people going to have a lot of questions. Put your questions in in the comment section. I'll get to that at the end. Right now, I just want to introduce our guests. We have 2 very special guests. We have, on one side, we got Mr. Grant Hammond. Grant Hammond is a real estate agent.
I am.
19 years in the business. He is the president and the principal broker of Metropolitan Brokers, which is your own company. You do a lot of infill, a lot of builds.
That's right.
A lot of, pretty much you do everything.
A lot of new construction.
Last year he closed over $65 million.
I did.
Which puts his career sales at just over $425 million. Dude, that is a hell of an accomplishment. Congrats, man.
Got to get to $500 million.
Love it, bro. You'll get there. You get there this year. He's a 3-time Greater Nashville's Diamond Elite Award winner, 4-time finalist for the Nashville Emerging Leader Award, a 16-time recipient of the 5-Star Excellence in Client Satisfaction, and he's a current member of GNR Legislative Committee in this fight and other fights for property rights.
That's right.
He is one of the main activists of the short-term rentals. Over here, on our other side, we have Alece, Ronzino.
Nailed it.
Yes. All right.
Italian, can pronounce my last name.
Yeah, so Alece is on the Nashville area. I know it, but I gotta read it because I know I'll get it wrong if I don't.
Everybody knows Nastra.
Nashville Area Short-Term Rental Association, NASTRA. They are a leading activist also in that. Tell everybody a little bit about NASTRA.
Yeah, our mission as an organization is to advocate for fair and responsible home sharing here in the greater Nashville area. So we have a network of hosts that we meet with regularly. We supply them with tools and tips on how to be the best host they can be and, manage their properties well as be good neighbors in the process. And then we advocate for fair laws and regulations at the same time.
Awesome.
Y'all been around, 2-3 years now?
Since 2016, I believe.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
now, is it a nonprofit or do you guys do anything else?
It is a not-for-profit 501c6.
All right. What is the difference between that and a 3?
That is a good question.
I guess that was probably a bad question.
No attorneys in this room.
A little above my pay grade right now.
Fair enough. After I asked that, I was like, wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got quite a few people on here now. A lot of people are kind of want to know. So last night we had 3 bills put in front of Metro. do you guys know do you want to go over the bills?
Yeah, let's take them in order.
Go.
So first one was BL 2019-78,
Yes.
which was what we refer to the 100-foot rule bill, which sought to, it was introduced by Councilman Colby Sledge and sought to put a distance requirement for non-owner occupied Airbnb short-term rentals between churches, schools, parks, and daycares and non-owner occupied STRs.
What is the distance?
So the proposed distance from Councilman Sledge was 100 feet from structure to structure for schools, daycares, and churches, but was 100 feet from property line to property line for parks. The issue is that planning staff reviewed the bill and recommended that it be 100 feet from property line to property line in all 4 instances. This rule emanates from the beer laws, where you cannot sell beer within 100 feet of churches, school, parks. It emanates from the adult bookstores, where you cannot have an adult bookstore 100 feet from a school, which makes sense. It was proposed because Councilman Sledge called the activities of non-owner occupied short-term rentals as secondary negative effects of lewdness, public intoxication. Basically, it's calling tourists a bunch of yahoos that you don't want staying next to your schools. One of the planning commissioners last night actually said that he was afraid that there would be an endangerment to children because he was worried that child molesters or people like that could stay in these STRs, which blew our minds.
Let's unpack that for a second. So you've got a council person that is saying this, and a lot of people ask this all the time. So where do the council people pull this data to be able to bring to the council?
Yeah, that's a fantastic. So fellow real estate agent Matt Davis did an insanely good job last night of statistical analysis. In his analysis, and I'm quoting this information from Matt, he found only one owner occupied unit that had a complaint within 100 feet of a church, school, park, or daycare. That complaint was investigated by codes and was dismissed without disciplinary action.
Oh.
So one.
So Colby Stretch. So basically, the council person put a bill together because of one complaint.
They put a bill together with no statistical information, no research, no thought process into, are they solving a problem with this legislation? They are legislating solves and solutions to problems that literally don't exist.
That's so why even bring the bill? Why do we think these bills are coming into play?
I'll let Alece answer that question.
Nice pass.
And if there's I'm very bold. If there's anything that we need off air, that's fine. But I know this is what Nashville is looking for.
I mean, we can all assume intent a million different ways, and I don't know if it's my position to assume the intent of anybody, let alone a council member.
Absolutely.
I wish he had been there to present his intent at the time of the discussion.
Okay, so basically, we can't really comment on that because he wasn't there. I did not realize he wasn't there.
He was there in the very beginning.
Okay, so he presented the bill, but we don't know where the data came from. We just know that there was just one complaint.
We know that there was one complaint against a non-owner occupied STR, which was investigated by codes, dismissed with no disciplinary action.
That applied to a non-owner occupied within 100 feet of one of these facilities.
Okay,
correct.
Only one.
And roughly,
and it was
fair.
dismissed.
How many permits do we have, give or take, in the Nashville community?
There's over 5,500.
Yeah, we have 5. So as of January 14th, I believe it was 5,878 current permits with 185 pending permits. The vast majority of those, 1,604, are in Councilman O'Connell's district, which is the downtown area. Those are master leases of apartment buildings like 505.
Okay, so a lot of those are actual businesses that do short-term rental.
Large businesses, not necessarily the small businesses like what we represent mostly are the individual owners.
Right, so it's fair that this is downtown, like in the actual downtown core. There's probably not a lot of residential around there.
Oh, there's plenty of residential down there. I mean, the 505 building, for instance, is 50% apartments and 50% condo. So it's literally within the same structure.
Got it.
I think that the point I was trying to make there was that they're legislating a solution to a problem that hasn't existed. 5,878 units and only one complaint, which, when investigated, was substantiated.
Cool.
Was not substantiated.
Statistically, it's a waste of time.
So fair enough. So that's
True.
Bill 1. That's kind of the overview on that. We got
So
Bill
they
2.
voted to defer one planning commission meeting where they're going to go back and do an analysis. They asked staff to do an analysis and
That's
provide
fair.
statistical analysis as to whether or not
Good.
land use policy should indeed be used to regulate what happens within 100 feet of a church in regards to short-term rentals.
Do we know how many people voted yes or no? Do we?
So-
4-4 tie
It was a 4-4.
on the
And
first
all
vote
of
to
4-4 tie.
pass.
To
It was
pass,
very
okay.
close to
It was-
approval.
It was very close, and then they made a second motion to defer. And I will say, I did appreciate, I believe it was Commissioner Sims was the one who said, I don't think we have enough data to make a decision
That
on
makes
this.
sense.
And
I mean-
I appreciate the call and request for more
Sure.
data on
And
it.
in Colby's
These
defense,
decisions need
like
to be made on data and not anecdotes.
Very good point. And in Colby's defense, he's probably speaking for the community, so he's trying to do his part for everybody else. So I feel like that was the right thing to do, right?
Yes, absolutely.
As a councilperson.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Okay.
the deferment for more
So-
research is helpful.
David, you were there last night. Was there a lot of people down there?
It was standing room only when we first got there, even to a point where the council decided to tackle other topics first and then come back to the Airbnb. And there was probably 90% of the people there for Airbnb, and there was a loud groan at that point, at which they kind of shut that down, being
Right.
like, "Hey, we're in charge. We do what we want."
Yeah.
It was a unique situation because we were items 11, 12, and 13 on the agenda. But correct me if I'm wrong, we were the last things talked about.
We were, and they admitted it was unusual
Yes.
for them to break the commission's agenda in that way, but they felt other issues were more important, and they.
And it's
wanted
just
to-
one meeting. I mean, it's not like
Well, I think it speaks more to the attitude that the planning commission maybe has regarding short-term rentals, and that maybe they don't deem them quite as the same plane as an SP request. Or,
sure, it makes sense.
So it's a little frustrating to be pushed down the agenda when it was already been published for
Cool.
more than almost a week.
Yeah, it sends a message that ultimately there is some kind of priority and hierarchy that they place on different land use policies in our city.
Right.
Which to me is very frustrating as a local agent, investor, and developer, because ultimately you hope that we all get the same treatment.
That's right. Yeah, you are almost supposed to be guaranteed
Right.
equal and fair treatment, and
Okay.
didn't quite feel that way last night.
That'll be another episode. I don't want to get too far into I kind of want to stay on top, but that's a wonderful point.
The lights.
And the light go up, but we move on. So that's Bill 1.
Yeah.
Could you go over Bill 2? And I have your notes if you need, by the way.
Sure. No, do you want to introduce it?
Sure.
Please.
Bill 2 was 2019-79,
Okay.
which, if I remember right, was introduced by Freddie O'Connell.
Yes.
And it was specifically regarding owner-occupied short-term rentals. It introduced 2 new requirements, one being that an owner-occupied residence could not be advertised or rented as a whole home or entire home rental, and that the owner could not be away from the premise for more than 15 consecutive hours while being rented.
Because that sounds easy to track.
Okay, so unpack that a little bit. So somebody that lives in their house, they can't advertise as a whole home. So usually, I guess for everybody out there, an owner-occupied Airbnb, this is where you live there and you have a room or a basement that you get short-term rentals. Maybe it's not every day or whatever. Am I
Or
correct?
even your whole house. Up until now, lawfully,
Oh.
your permit allows you to rent your whole house.
Oh,
You don't have to legally be on site during the rental.
did not know that.
But this has a lot of impact in a variety of ways. One, traveling musicians, medical professionals, anyone
Military
Sports,
that chooses
military,
to rent their
yeah.
whole house while they're away for work or deployment would no longer be allowed to.
So you can, if you're in the military and you're home, you can rent it out, but if you get deployed, you cannot.
Correct.
So-
According to this.
So
bill.
according to,
Yeah, and I have 2 clients who are members of the 101st Airborne who were just deployed on active duty to the Middle East who would be affected by this.
so if they're on deployment right now, how do they defend themselves of this bill that was just introduced last week?
You make an excellent point.
It's interesting.
You make an excellent point.
Yeah.
You know, they said to me, one of them said to me, they said, Grant, don't let this get FUBAR on me. Otherwise, I'll come and get all red hat. So I had to look all that up.
Well,
that's not good.
On their behalf, thanks for looking out for them. But that just doesn't make any. Okay, moving on to that.
The other component of that is that if you have an owner-occupied permit for your dadu, above garage apartment, or a walkout basement, a mother-in-law suite, any space where the guest has private and complete access with their own entrance,
Okay.
that is advertised online on every listing platform as a whole home rental. That's how it would come up in search. That's how it's defined, because they don't have to share any physical space or entrance with the homeowner. So it's advertised that way. This bill would say you cannot advertise it that way.
So a dadu, David, you're the king of dadus. You want to explain to everybody what a dadu is?
For sure. Dadu is simply a detached accessory dwelling unit. Not on any, but on a lot of lots that are zoned for 2 builds, sometimes you will actually have 2 units that are separate, like an HPR, but occasionally you'll have an R6 lot where a single house is there and somebody can build a garage apartment off the alley with a unit above it. Or if you live in Cleveland Park or McFerrin Park, it has an SP overlay where all that is RS5 zoning, but it has a DADU eligibility where you can build a second unit off the back alley. It's basically a miniature house, usually 700 square feet or so.
Sure.
It's completely detached.
Over a garage a lot of times.
Sometimes, or not even.
Okay.
Like, I'm building one right now that won't even have a garage. It's just a single story. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 700 square foot house, completely private, off the alley. They have their own entrance, own kitchen, everything. Nobody gets bothered. And ultimately, that bill was saying that you wouldn't be able to advertise that as its own structure, even though it would be.
Okay.
I think it's important to say the intent, I believe, was to simplify the process by which you obtain a permit and for enforcement. So the idea is if you can homogenize the way that you define a owner-occupied permit, then you can make enforcement a lot easier. What they did not take into account was how these are listed on the platforms. And so clearly, in this case, the council member O'Connell, who has been in this short-term rental, let's call it spirited debate for his entire council career.
What district is that?
So he is in and I think it's District 19.
Okay.
He was instrumental and involved in Bill 608 in 2017, and Bill 1633 this year. It was council member Berkeley Allen's bill.
Mm-hmm.
So he is very well into this, and it's surprising to see a council member who has that much knowledge also not understanding how the platforms work. And I think it speaks a little bit to the fact that these council members are not necessarily speaking to the entire community.
Okay.
We certainly have not had a meeting with council member O'Connell in a number of months.
So there wasn't like a community meeting or anything?
Not that we're aware of. If there was a community meeting, we were not invited.
Because usually, I mean, I go for rezones quite a bit, David. You do. I mean, we're required to have a community meeting to talk to the neighbors, sometimes to talk about what we're putting there and why, and maybe feedback. So these bills were introduced with no community meeting. Is that an actual rule, or we just kind of, is that just like?
It's not a law. You do not have to lawfully have a community meeting prior to submitting a bill for legislation.
So that's probably why there's so many people there, because that's actually their time for the community to meet.
This was the first public hearing where the general public, citizens of Nashville, could get up and share either their support of the bill or their opposition.
So is there a time frame when they submit a bill before they have a meeting like that? Is there a required time frame to get everybody notice and to show up and to have some knowledge of what they're going for? Or do they just like, oh, here's a bill, let's do a community meeting? And
yeah, what's interesting in this case, when you go to rezone a property, typically the homeowners around that area get a letter in the mail talking about it, a rezoning.
Yeah, it's like 1,000 feet around the subject property.
In this case, how do you send out letters to everyone within 1,000 feet of a homeowner-occupied short-term rental?
Well, it's a law that impacts
Davidson
County. They would have to notify the entire county.
And so they didn't. Yeah, so they didn't.
And they would have to, though. I mean, that's 250, 300,000 people.
So yeah, that's the part that's a little bit frustrating. And so we learn of these bills when they're submitted for first reading, and we get to see legislation for the first time then. and we can see the wording. And there's some really easy fixes that if the council member had maybe shared some thoughts or had some meetings or met with, what blows my mind a little bit is that if we're regulating short-term rentals, the Nashville Area Short-Term Rental Association is literally the authority on those rules as they sit, and they understand how legally, lawfully permitted users.
And that's what you do. You're making sure everybody's doing the right thing.
And we would love a seat at the table for those discussions.
And
I feel like you should be, because you probably, I don't know a lot about your organization, but do you study the data? Do you look at these kind of things? Like, can you bring an intelligent piece to this?
Yes, we absolutely can. Yes.
The most intelligent piece in almost all instances.
So what else do we miss about that second bill?
I will just point out that Planning Commission's staff recommendation regarding that bill was to remove the 15-hour time requirement.
Sure, I mean,
because they noted it
God
as
forbid
being
somebody goes to the
completely
hospital or something.
unenforceable.
Yeah, right.
How would that even be monitored, tracked, enforced?
Fair
There's
enough.
no way.
It'd be invasion
So
of
staff
privacy.
did recommend that gets removed. And the way the vote ended on that, they decided again to defer. I think they were hearing people on the mismatch of the phrase entire home or whole home and how things are listed online, and that would have a far-reaching impact that was not intended with this, and that if the intent is either better enforcement or weeding out people that are fraudulently obtaining owner-occupied permits but not truly being a resident there, then find a better way to require that proof. Yeah. And they seemed open to that, which is why they decided ultimately to defer, and again to allow some more time for data and research, which hopefully will happen.
Okay, well, good. I mean, at least they're open to that.
Again, deferral was a win at this point.
But at least on a deferral, people know they have some time to prepare.
And it doesn't get immediately enacted today because of pending legislation ordinance. If it passes Planning Commission, even though it has not been voted into law by Metro City Council,
everybody pauses.
It would be enacted into law as though it was passed as of this morning.
So you're saying,
a deferral means at least that did not happen.
So they're still issuing permits, but if that doesn't get deferred,
if it passes planning, then as of this morning they would have stopped issuing them. And there were people there last night speaking to the fact that they just finished construction on their dadu. They're in process waiting on the fire marshal to finish their permit. They would have lost the right to get their permit.
So
if it passed.
One thing that I know people have asked me is the whole HPR thing. An HPR is a density solution in Nashville for 2 units on certain type of zoning, a certain type of lots.
It's like a virtual. It's like taking a lot, instead of subdividing it, it's a virtual subdivision of the lot to typically create 2 homes on one lot, just like you have, in R6, R8, R10.
So if I had a job where I make a certain amount of money and maybe I could buy a $700,000 house, I can theoretically buy 2 $350,000 houses next to each other, and I could live in one side. And since I own both, is it true that I could own or occupy Airbnb, the one next door, that I also own?
That's currently true.
Yes.
That's currently true. So does this bill affect those people?
So that's up for, again, that's a little bit up for debate.
Okay.
Because the owner-occupied, I believe there was language in there that said that Councilman O'Connell had in there that specifically referred to HPRs as an exception.
Now, is that an HPR on a residential R6 zone lot, or is that an HPR on an RM lot, an OR lot?
So that's residentially zoned property.
So if you had an HPR and an RM, you're okay at this point?
Well, again, not really well defined because this bill was so vague.
Fair enough.
There's a lot of gray area in all of these. Like the lasting implications in all the bills that we're talking about. I mean, they're not supposed to be harmful, as they're saying, but ultimately they can be, and they will be.
Sure.
Passed.
Okay.
Yeah, the commission last night said negative unintended consequences about 30 times when debating these 3 bills, and they recognize that there are.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, that means that they haven't game planned out entirely what would happen, and that there would likely be negative unintended consequences from these bills as written.
Negative unintended consequences.
The intent of the bill
Right.
maybe
we don't-
for one thing, but it also opens the door for all these other instances where
Got it.
law-abiding citizens would be restricted, and that wasn't the original intent, but legally,
Yeah,
So-
collateral
they would be
damage is
impacted.
still-
So let's
Yeah.
talk about those homeowners. I mean, like that buy 2 units and they can now. I mean, what happens to their property value? I mean, I know that we talked about traveling nurses and stuff like that. I know there's some teachers, a lot of people. Like, what would happen to that other?
So the state stepped in a couple of years ago and passed the Short-Term Rental Act, Senate Bill 1086, which grandfathers in. And if you have a legally operating at short-term rental in the state of Tennessee in good standing, that no matter what a municipality does in the meantime, you can continue to lawfully operate that as long as you remain in good standing.
So basically, that one person won't be able to do it.
asterisk, under the laws that were in place at the time you were issued your permit.
Correct.
Got
That's
it.
how it's worded. So
Okay.
you have to abide by all the laws that were in place when you got it, no matter how the laws change
Correct.
subsequently.
Is there anything we want to add about Bill 2 before we move on to 3?
One last thing is that Planning Commission really debates land use policy.
Okay.
This second bill, it's not really a land use policy. It really is an enforcement bill. Now, Planning Commission, here's everything that comes through council, gets referred to planning, and then planning refers on to council. It was interesting to see the debate between the commissioners, as this wasn't truly a land use policy issue. And they recognized that,
Okay.
and yet still they voted to defer to get more information. I think that the Planning Commission in that instance saw the complexities and wanted to help council,
Okay.
which we really appreciated.
Good.
Because they could have just said, this isn't in our purview, we'll pass it along and let council debate it.
Mhm.
They're trying to help in this instance.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate that effort.
Good. Awesome. So, who would like to go over the third bill?
We need to take a break before that. This is going to be quite the discussion.
I like
Yeah,
the
'cause this
discussions.
one's the most impactful.
This is the one.
Do you
that
want to
could
see
be-
them? Let me just see if there's any questions
Sure.
before we move on.
Yeah.
And thanks everyone for joining. We're on Deal Shredders episode number 7 with Alece, Ronzino from Nastra, Mr. Grant Hammond over here. I've got a new comment. Let's just peek around. I do see some questions. I'm flowing through here. Let's see. Thank you, Megan, for putting that perfect. So let's talk about the article and how people can take action on the article that you guys had this week.
Yeah, well, we were initially kind of gearing up for the meeting that happened last night. We put out information on the Nastra website, which is just nastra.org, nastra.org,
Awesome.
which you can follow along.
Gonna
on
go ahead
there.
and
We're
put that
gonna
in
be
here.
updating things on there later today with a full report from last night. But we had, created a way for people to easily email all of Planning Commission with some suggested talking points and the issues that we see, the concerns that we have regarding those 3 bills, and then encourage people to come out last night. And so we'll keep that updated with the new dates for the rescheduled and deferred hearings for when things will go before council, so that all of us as a community can continue to engage on this issue together.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to know that Nastra has engaged legal representation, that these are not just opinions put together by owners of STRs. There is true legal thought put into what is being proposed by council and by commission. So this is not just a group of realtors who are just
Sure.
throwing their opinions around as we do sometimes. This is truly intelligent analysis of legal ramifications from bills being proposed.
So,
Thanks, Grant. I appreciate the endorsement.
yeah, as far as the data, you put some data together.
I did.
Do you mind if I were to share that link at the end?
No, absolutely, you should.
What is on that exactly?
So we decided to determine what the scope of the economic impact is on short-term rentals
Financially.
financially for the city.
Fair enough.
And so we gathered the information straight from the Metro website. So that's where we came up with the 5,878 total permits active as of January 14th.
Okay.
We took that number as a constant. Then we took the 5% hotel motel tax that each would pay, the $2 per night
Mhm.
occupancy tax that is paid, and the average occupancy of an STR with the average number of occupants of an STR. We're able to mathematically show what the financial impact is for Davidson County.
So that's just taxes that go straight from the county. So I almost feel like it's.
So not only do they go straight to the county, but short-term rentals are the single only dedicated source of funding for the Barnes Fund.
And what is the Barnes Fund?
The Barnes Fund is the affordable housing fund that Metro put together under the Dean administration, together with Council member Berkeley Allen, who was instrumental in getting the short-term rental revenue, tax revenue, to flow into the Barnes Fund.
So how would we fund the Barnes Fund if we're taking these taxes away?
It would be a huge loss.
Here's fair. Okay, so that's what they were. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I feel like that this is. I feel like these taxes. I mean, so these people that are getting taxed are actually giving to affordable housing, which we all Nashville talks about all the time. How prices are inflated. I mean, that's here nor there, but I feel like though there's people actually contributing to better housing for everybody, and that could potentially go away.
The fund would still exist.
Correct.
As the only dedicated source, there are other sources. It's just not a consistent dedicated primary source.
Okay.
Metro's government budget allocates some funds. That figure and percentage changes, though. There would be a huge loss. In the last fiscal year alone, our contribution as short-term rental hosts has been $1.7 million into the Affordable Housing Fund.
And then that gets divvied up and used on affordable housing projects across the entire county.
Across the entire county, as
and
voted on
grants
by.
and things of that nature.
Yeah, as voted on. And I think it's important, just from the 10,000 foot view, people may not know Nashville has been growing at an unprecedented rate, and yet last year we ran a $41.5 million deficit at budget. At one point, the state controller sent a letter to Metro that said, if you do not balance your budget, we are going to step in as the state and take over your budget. So it got really serious really quick under the new Cooper administration. Wow. Cooper stepped in and found $41.5 million. If those funding sources do not come through, then they're likely going to have the state step in and take them out. Now, how they made up that $41 million, there's a new water tax that really quietly has gone through. That started this
year, right?
Very quietly.
Water taps.
So your tap fees tripled. So now taxes went up there. The Barnes Fund was not fully used towards affordable housing, so
they cut it significantly. Metro's contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund was cut to help this budget.
$5 million.
That doesn't make sense.
$5 million.
Okay, so I mean, the buzzword is affordable housing in Nashville. Yes. I didn't even know this. So as the buzzword, we're saying the city just cut their own funding for affordable housing because they can't manage.
Like $5 million.
Can you unpack what affordable housing really means? I don't really know exactly what it is. You guys know?
Well, I've always heard the definition.
It's not just
if I'm wrong, it's less than what the median house price is in the Nashville area.
So where does the money go? Does it go to people that were building the affordable houses for people that make a certain amount of income?
That's where the majority of it is. So
developers,
there were, and you'll have to look this up to verify, there were either 10 or 11 projects that were going to get funded this fiscal year by those funds, and they had to then go back and decide which ones to cut. So it was a gut-wrenching, proposition to go back, because there were 30 or 40 or 50 projects considered. They narrowed it down to the top 10 or 11 that would benefit citizens in particular areas. Okay. And then they had to go back gut-wrenchingly tell those folks, I'm sorry, you're not.
Oh, so they actually told these people that, hey, I'm sorry, you were going to live here, but now you can't?
Not the people, the developers.
So there's developers that are stepping up to actually help these people.
That's right.
And now we're not able to do that.
That's right.
And we're actually getting taxed on top of that.
That's right.
Okay.
So I'd call that cut another unintended consequence of trying to balance our budget as a city right now.
Eric Hensley was wanting to ask what the date was that was deferred on the 100-foot.
Just one planning commission meeting.
Yeah, next month.
Okay.
I don't know the date offhand, but we'll have it all posted online.
It's approximately 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that, Grant. That's crazy to me because I mean, that topic jumps up in every conversation with so many planning commission. Like we heard about the 288 unit development last night for a good portion of 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
And they're doing affordable housing.
Which is a great project, by the way.
Absolutely. Great project. And it almost kind of got
almost
got halted because of an extra road access point that they wanted that was not necessary and would have made the budget not feasible, basically.
That's right.
And yet the city is pulling out. To me, that doesn't make any sense. You said this is a priority, but obviously your checkbook is not showing that.
It's as embarrassing as I think it can be for a council member to run on a platform of affordable housing, and then literally cut the fund 50% in one calendar year.
And Megan put a comment on here. I'm pretty sure she wants me to say, well, meanwhile, after all that, they're actually providing billions in incentives to hotels to build.
Yep.
True. I mean, we're trying to, the hotel lobby is one of the most powerful lobbies at the local level. Lots of representation at the state level from all different special interest groups. The hotel lobby is, by and large, the largest contributor to local council member election funds. And so without drawing a conclusion or telling you factually what's happening here, we're seeing all of these bills that don't necessarily affect hotels, but affect their direct competition. And so
that's really
draw your own conclusions. It's just interesting to see this barrage, especially when it's based on what a council member will say is based on the thousands of calls and complaints, but host compliance data does not back up the fact that there's actually that many complaints. Here's the statistical fact that came out last night. Again, thank you to Matt Davis and Darren Cunningham for getting this information out. Of all the complaints lodged in 2019, 0.2% were about short-term rentals. Short-term rentals make up 1.2% of the housing stock, or excuse me, 1.8% of the housing stock. That means that a non-short-term rental, a regular homeowner, an office building, whatever, are 9 times more likely to get a complaint than a short-term rental is.
So it's just a fake problem.
They're legislating a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Because of
the
what?
Scale that they're trying to create a
because
sweeping solution.
back to the funding.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just. Because of what? That's the question.
Correct.
And look, I'll be the first to admit that there are real complaints. There are some issues.
Sure.
They are 99% enforcement related, and not land policy use related. Not because it's 100 feet from a church related.
Sure.
Not
I understand rules have to be in place, but I want to hear from the community.
Smart rules are good rules.
Sure.
Enforceable rules. We can't just keep adding more rules and we're not enforcing the ones already in place.
That's
We did hear some heart-wrenching stories last night of people who have had atrocious experiences at the hands of a short-term rental next to them.
I believe that.
That is appalling.
Sure.
And those of us that are good, responsible
No one wants
hosts,
that.
We do not
No one
endorse
wants
or
that.
support that kind of behavior, and we want those ones shut down. This
Sure.
is an enforcement issue. We don't need another law to take care of that.
Right, and there doesn't really seem to be a big issue. So moving on from that, are we ready to go into Bill 3?
Yeah, sure.
Let's go into Bill 3.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Pandora's
cut you
box.
off, right?
Here it
Okay, cool.
comes.
I just want to make sure I didn't cut you off.
we're
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So let's talk about it from a
What is it?
a 10,000-foot view first, and then we'll drill down into what it really means. So Bill 2019-111 is a bill which proposes to create carbon copies of nearly 40 zonings that are currently on the book and add a -NS after them, which means no short-term rentals. That's owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied. It's a tool that they're trying to create for their stated purpose of any rezoning requests that come through. They'll be able to say, you can do this, but it will have a no short-term rental component. Instead of sending people through the lengthy and more expensive SP process,
Sure.
they're trying to find a way to make it so that you can do a straight rezoning and they don't have to worry about short-term rental as a part of a component of your project.
So is that going to be put on the full zoning or this policy, or where is that going to?
This is a brand new. This almost doubles the zoning book in
Zoning code table.
the zoning code table in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
You'd have like RM20 and then RM20 dash
NS.
NS.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is not just mixed use and commercial. This is everything except for IWD and DTC. Downtown Code, Industrial or Housing Development
Sure.
is not included in this.
RS,
And
residential.
Yeah, and the residential.
Kept out.
RS we understand because it is.
It's already.
Is it already?
Yeah, it already
Yeah.
is.
But I'm just going to throw this out there. So NS actually doesn't seem to be bad if it's parcel by parcel case basis instead of blanket.
Well, yeah.
Like I can understand. Like I don't know. Maybe a community meeting. Maybe that's something where they agree on, but just for like one parcel. not for the entire zone.
Well, that's the stated reason for the new zoning, is so that it can be on a case-by-case, parcel-by-parcel.
Okay.
But and that's the council member's stated reason. It's not stated in the bill itself. So our greatest fear is that a council member has a community meeting, or does not, because it's not legally required, and introduces a bill that downzones properties in their district, either street by street or block by block, or district by district, to this new no short-term renting zoning. And so I think the argument they're going to make is that it's not a down zone because you're still RM20 or you're still MUL. They're going to call it a right zoning, but it truly is a down zoning because the only reason they created this zoning code is to eliminate one legally permitted use. Never in the history of council have we seen them create 40 new zonings to eliminate one permitted use. The last time you can see council doing that was landfills. And that was prior to the new code. Nashville Next was really the brainchild of zoning codes planning, working together to create a zoning code that would be form-based, that would really help clarify what you can do in specific zones. Never was it the intent of the architects of Nashville Next to now see 40 new zonings that eliminate one permitted use.
Wow.
So that's a scary precedent to set, because what happens when it is working from home? What if all of a sudden they say it's a nuisance because, there's cars parked in the driveway?
On that, there's somebody was talking about recording studios.
Recording studios.
I mean,
bill up for legislation, right?
Sure.
I mean, that is
Or
absolutely
what if it's
ridiculous.
long-term rentals? What if there's a district that says, you know what, we only want owner occupancy. We want this super family, everyone lives there,
That
utopic
sounds like,
society.
I mean, that
What
sounds like
happens-
fair housing to me.
Well, what happens when that council member says, you know what, I'm going to do a dash no long-term too. So now I'm going to have a RM20-NS-NL. Now there's a precedent set for them to be able to go and do that.
It's like a blanket HOA without being able to vote on it. Really.
That's right. And so
Or knowing that before you bought it, there would be that.
that's right. That's right. And you have very little opportunity to speak with your particular council person. Now, I'm going to say a council person's name here because I know of what that council person's done so far in their tenure. Angie Henderson is a proud council member for downzoning properties in her district.
District
She
number?
ran on street by street, block by block.
Which district is this? Okay, fine. No.
So,
Go
well,
ahead.
I mean, I guess I could say
No,
because I
that's
just
fine.
said her. But
You don't have to.
so she proudly has downzoned property. During the Planning Commission debate last night, one of her fellow commissioners brought up a contentious one in which she was downzoning 5 properties, 2 of which vehemently opposed. And yet they still crammed it through. And so, 2 out of 5 members of the community don't want it, and yet it still gets pushed through. I can see a very reasonable path, a very foreseeable future of certain members of council using this as a tool to downzone, or what they will call right zone, properties to non-short-term rental. And that's owner occupied and not. That's both. That's a huge, in my view, property right violation, especially
Absolutely.
as we live in the state of Tennessee.
Or anywhere.
Just, it's unbelievable to me that tool would be given to somebody.
And one thing that was interesting was many of the commissioners last night in their debate and discussion about this emphasized their unwavering trust in council that council members would not do this in a way that would harm or have a negative impact, that they would always listen to their constituents, and that they take these matters so seriously that they would not necessarily go against the wishes of the citizens or the homeowners. But then the example of that case that Angie Henderson discussed, and then one of the things I even personally shared at the meeting last night, my own home, my street, 8 homes on my street were rezoned this past year, even though 5 of the 8, including myself, opposed the rezone. We wrote letters to Planning Commission, Metro Council, our council member, and it still passed. So based on my experience, it tells me that this new zoning code will be used in the same way. I wish we could all have the same faith in our current council or hypothetical future councils made up of
Yeah.
people we don't know yet, and we're giving them a lot of power.
Yeah, this is a council who, during council meetings, during legal procedures, have said words like, "I hate short-term rentals. I abhor short-term
Sounds
rentals."
like it was just a single person's opinion.
It is potentially a single person's opinion, but what we know is that it's a very hostile council currently that has an attitude of anti-short-term renters' property rights.
It just goes back to why.
Again, a question that
Right.
you'll have to draw your own
Yeah.
conclusion to.
Exactly. I mean, we're all semi-intelligent and kind of get where that's going, but I just don't see how that is going to make our city grow. I think it's going to make our city start holding back.
Yeah, so that's where we need to start talking about the unintended consequences. And so there's quite a few. One unintended consequences is going to be the moment that this is used for a down zone or a right zone is
Property values.
not just property values, but also lawsuits.
Sure.
Those property owners are likely going to get together and sue the city.
We've already seen property values start shifting a little bit with the last time that we had this.
Sure. Yeah, anything that the city does to make it more difficult, more convoluted, more ununderstandable, unintelligible, makes it more difficult to find any type of stability in it. And so part of what we believe is that if we can all work together in one large coalition to come up with a set of rules by which we can all play, that a lot of those problems would be solved. But council has and planning commission has not necessarily heard our calls for those meetings and hasn't held that.
Okay. So I guess the next logical question would be to everybody listening and watching, like, what could the citizens do to help protect themselves and their own properties?
Well, regarding this bill in particular, we didn't discuss the outcome of it last night. Commission unanimously voted it to pass.
Okay.
Unanimously?
I
didn't know that.
thought it was unanimous.
Well,
was
there was no, the way that the planning commission votes, they say,
ayes
they
and
make a
then
motion and they said ayes, and then anyone who says, dissents say no, no one said
Nobody
anything.
said no. So
But I will say
Okay.
that I didn't hear 8 voices for the ayes.
true. There were no vocal no's.
But I heard such a loud voice coming from Angie Henderson that may have drawn out the other. It was just
So
it
it
was
did pass,
crazy.
Okay.
which means it goes to Metro Council, and that will be a public hearing.
And that's the second reading public hearing for that one.
Yes,
Okay.
which will be, constituents' opportunity
Right.
to go and voice their
Second
thoughts
and
on
last,
Yeah.
and
And
last
last, yeah.
opportunity to voice your.
And then nastra.org, we're gonna keep everybody updated with these
it.
dates.
Call to actions,
Okay.
everything everyone needs to know to stay involved and engaged on.
And
this.
right now, just so everybody knows, I did put in the comments what your call to action could be right now to be able to reach directly out to council and kind of what to say. So that's really easy to do. It takes 2 seconds. So if you are a homeowner,
Send an email. It's really easy.
yeah, I mean,
There's
if you're worried about your property values,
Yeah.
send an email. Everybody, these are times where Nashville, we all need to come together. We all need to act intelligently and peacefully. And that's our right. And this is a really easy tool that NASTRA put together to do that. And I thank you for I'm sure everybody thanks you for that. What were you going to say? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, so the email address, there's an email address for the planning commission, there's an email address for the council. It literally goes to all the members of that body. You only send one email. You don't even need to know who your commissioner or your
Right,
council
okay.
member is.
So there's no research involved. You just copy, paste, done.
And then just, from my standpoint, an email that's just copied and pasted is likely not very effective. You need to say how it personally affects you and what you believe. And, this is the time for you to reach out to council to explain to them your thoughts and feelings and concerns.
Okay.
And
we need to show up to the meetings.
Yes.
that's
People need to show up.
That's the biggest thing, right? So, everyone gets a lot of emails all the time, and I think we're all desensitized if we start getting a bunch of emails.
You see the inbox, they're not going to open them all. Fair enough.
Right. But when you go to an actual council meeting and they have a public hearing and they see 100 people lined up during the public discussion to speak for 3 minutes on a particular bill, it's very impactful. As an example, when 1633 was going through, That's exactly what happened.
What was 1633?
1633 was the RM bill that Councilmember Berkeley Allen introduced. That was stated purpose was to bring the city's laws into compliance with the state short-term rental act. That stated purpose was not necessarily the true motivation behind it, but it was to add RM to the same category as R and RS properties. During that process, Council Member Allen was very gracious about hosting a lot of meetings and attended a very big meeting put together at a local church where she actually got up on stage with a microphone and answered questions along with Nastro, along with a couple of influential developers, along with Metro Codes.
I'm just guessing that's what we need to see, right?
Well, and it took time to put that together.
Sure.
And
but it's a big thing. It's a big deal.
In that process, what ended up happening is that we were able to come to a compromise where everyone wouldn't have been hurt as badly as they would have been had that been passed as originally constructed. It would have devastated 14 to 15 developers, would have been on the verge of bankruptcy. Which is, again, unintended consequences that council members don't fully have the ability to
they probably don't know. They need to hear. Well, I mean,
here's that. I mean, I can't remember the gentleman's name. The person that was to the left of the main person in charge. That gentleman. Anyways, he very openly.
Talk about the chair.
Yeah, very openly said that he doesn't really care about the cost that developers pay for lots and developments
that's not
with an
the chair.
arm. Huh?
that wasn't the chair. You're talking about the
guy
silver hair
right,
fox.
Yes, I can't remember his name, but he blatantly
Premium pricing.
Yeah, because some people were saying, well, we paid a premium for these lots or these properties, and he basically said, I've said this many times, like, I don't really care. Shame on you.
Right.
But what about
chastised?
Yeah, but what about the people that have owned these lots for years, and they finally get an actual payday? I mean, this is.
So that's the narrow view
of the economy.
Yeah, so that's the narrow view that certain members of planning commission and council members have. They only think of it as the people who have engaged in this activity over the last 3 years, that, our capital markets identified an opportunity and have taken advantage of it, just like you do in a capital society. And what he sees is that. What he doesn't see are the people who have owned lots in areas that just have not developed for the last 30 years since the interstate system came through and literally divided certain communities in half.
Yes.
Some of those communities have been cut off
and never revitalized. Yeah, people think like, oh, anything in Nashville is this, and all the prices in Nashville going up. There's a lot of areas of town that just got stuck with the prices.
That's right.
Squished way down.
That's right. And a lot of them could not exit at a price at which they could retire or live comfortably or pay for medical procedures or whatnot.
That's like how the town is really uneven when it comes to that.
Very much. Yeah, very much so. Everyone says,
I know a lot of agents, they're telling like, oh, the market's hot and this and that. And it kind of is, but we got to be realistic on where this is.
Right. Yeah.
There's a certain district that it has not appreciated since 2015.
Yeah. People say Nashville and they envision the skyline.
Correct.
And how it's changed.
And the core.
But you got to remember, the MSA area of Nashville is massive.
Yeah.
And we are a very spread out city.
Absolutely.
And a lot of areas have not seen the appreciation.
Within 20 minutes of town, there's a lot of areas that have not seen appreciation.
Or the new construction, or the essential services from Metro. They've got schools that are dying in that district.
A lot of districts.
And so a lot of those kids have to get bused to other districts, adding to the time, adding to truancy. Like, there's a lot of really systematic and really hard issues that are going to have to be addressed.
I mean, I know there's a lot of roads that there's so many people walking up and down. There's no sidewalks. I mean, this is a whole different subject, but there is so many areas of town that need attention.
That's right.
But anyway, it's a whole different show.
It is, and that's part of the unintended consequences.
Correct.
If you disallow, if a council member in that district says, I like the way this district is, it has a certain feel to it that we all love as homeowners, and put this rezone that entire, block by block or district in that particular way, they will essentially miss out on the opportunity of appreciation from short-term leasing activities. And those property rights will be gone.
Yeah.
And likely for right now, that district will go back to not growing.
Yep.
Until there's another reason for it to grow.
Yep.
You know, growth doesn't happen evenly across all areas. It happens because there's a reason for it to grow.
People almost demand it for a lot of.
There's always some kind of niche that comes to the market,
Yeah.
whether it's Germantown and its walkability and everything,
Yeah,
or
that's
whether
right.
you're in different parts of East Nashville, 5 Points, Inglewood, or I mean, I personally live in Cleveland Park, and over the last 2.5 years, we've seen 30% appreciation on houses with daddies. I want y'all to think about that for a second.
It's a big number.
A house over 2.5 years ago, you know, selling for $500,000. Now it's selling for $660 to $700. Like, and that's the top of the market, and it's still appreciated by 10 to 12% per year. But that's because of short-term rental capabilities with daddies. So it has long-reaching consequences for a lot of metropolitan areas that are very close to downtown.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So before we wrap this up, do we cover everything?
Not even close.
Is there anything that we should, okay? Is there anything that's super important that we need to talk about?
As it relates to these 3 bills, I mean, that definitely is, you know, the 10,000-foot view. There are a lot more moving parts and a lot more detail oriented.
Are there any initial consequences with the third bill being passed last night immediately? Like, I know that with the first
That's
two,
a wonderful question.
If they would have passed that, you know, any legislation would have paused all.
Yeah, the answer is no, because they're building a tool right now. They're not actually doing a rezoning. But the analogy I gave last night at the Planning Commission, which might be a little nerdy, is that it's like the council is creating the Infinity Stones, and they're about to hand it over to Thanos when it's passed. So just because you have the Infinity Stones doesn't mean you have to use them.
Right.
But you know, no matter what the yeah, sorry, it got a little nerdy.
No, snap of a finger.
We love nerdy.
And a snap of a finger, all of a sudden there's a rezone that happens, and all of a sudden your rights just evaporate.
Yeah.
Just like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I get the reference entirely, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, and so there's a better reference that another person came up with that, you know, might be a little racy for a podcast.
All right, fair enough. We'll go to you now. You were going to say something.
I would like to encourage or even challenge you to engage. If you are hearing all of this and, you know, this is on something that's personal or passion point or rubs you the wrong way, please engage. Your voice does matter. As we saw last night, not with the third bill, but with Bill 68 and 79, we saw a positive result from what happened when we show up, a strong unified show of force, and we share both the personal impact. We humanize these bills. We take the words off the page and we explain how it will personally impact us, and we presented data. Those two things combined caused a deferral on 2 of the bills. Your voice matters. So if you're normally not inclined to engage in politics, or this feels scary and overwhelming, first off, I totally get it, which is why NASTRA as an organization tries to make it as easy and just like something you can wrap your brain and your hands around. We will provide as many tools as we ever possibly can with making it easy on how to contact people, who to contact, what dates things are happening that you need to show up
Where
for.
could they go to
be.
find that? Where's the
Keep
easy?
going to nastra.org, nastra.org, in our news section, and just plug in Your Voice Matters, so please use it.
And if you're a realtor, reach out to your realtor association. So if you're a member of GNR, they're now very active and visible for the first time in quite some time.
Yeah.
If you're a member of WCAR or Wilson County,
All of them.
or they're all paying attention to these issues. And even though your realtor association may not be based in Davidson County, they're active. They're paying attention.
It affects them too.
Absolutely, because what happens in Nashville may not necessarily be in their district, but the precedent set.
It's a ripple effect.
They'll trickle
Just
down
like the
to the
value
next
effect,
municipality.
Yeah. I mean, it spreads out.
And I've seen a lot of comments online of people saying, oh, well, the state will step in and handle this. And I think we need to not keep passing the buck and hoping someone else will step in and do something.
But the damage
We are the ones who need to do something.
Yeah.
If we wait till the state to step in, we already have too many.
We're too far gone.
So
too
whether-
many consequences.
Whether you're a real estate agent, I'm hoping that a lot of homeowners that are not real estate agents, that they step out too. They go to nastra.org, they reach out to us, they show up to the meetings. We're going to be posting I watch you guys whenever you guys post something. I share it. So we're going to be really adamant about knowing when these hearings are and what is coming up. So we'll watch for Nashville. They're also on Facebook. You can read. Megan is the president.
Yeah.
She has put a comment in these, which will be staying up, of the call to action that we need to do right now.
Perfect.
Grant, is there any? I know you're getting blown up. I've seen your phone ding, 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 ding,
No,
all the time.
I don't know who's calling
And
me.
I don't want to overwhelm Grant. So I mean, go to real. Do you want to give it? What's the best way to get a hold of you? That if anybody needs to know anything, do you want people to get a hold?
Yeah, for me, I am a statistical analysis type fellow. I enjoy numbers, and so I did put together the statistical analysis of the economic impact of STRs on Davidson County.
Okay.
Look at that spreadsheet, all based in fact. There's no conjecture.
I'm going to go ahead and post that in the comments.
Yeah, numbers
in my
came
email.
from the Metro website. I also got data from the Nashville Convention and Visitors Corporation.
Okay.
I also got numbers from AirDNA and from Smith Travel Resources. So
Perfect.
all reputable places. Just simply put it in a spreadsheet and did the math.
Yep.
Look at that spreadsheet. It's pretty eye-opening that these short-term rentals have a $28 million positive revenue event on Metro, and that does not include the spending that those visitors go and spend. So if you include the average of $104 per day spend, you're talking about tens and tens of millions of dollars. And this is not just local revenue. This is state revenue, because state sales tax is divided such that the state gets 7% of every dollar spent, and the city gets $2.25.
So this is I mean, I feel like this industry, I mean, it's very obvious, but that's why Nashville is where it is, and that's why we get 250,000 people here on New Year's Eve.
That's right. You know, or for the
not all of them can go to a hotel room downtown.
The this is another interesting point. The Nashville Convention Center Tourist Visitor Bureau had said that they could not have pulled off the NFL draft without having short-term rentals available.
No, of course not.
If we want more events like the NFL draft that put us on the world stage, we have to have these options for people to come and stay in.
Yeah.
Our hotel stock cannot handle it. The stock that's under construction still cannot handle it.
It's just like a market, though. Not everybody wants to stay in a hotel.
Well, that's the thing. Here's a great example. When you go to the beach, where did you stay?
On the beach.
If you stayed on the beach, you likely didn't stay in a hotel. You likely stayed in a privately owned, either condo, townhome, house. You know, the state of Florida has a statistic that says that more than 70% of the people who come to the state of Florida stay in a private residence.
Yeah.
This is the same thing. You want to stay with your family.
Yeah.
You want to hang out with them. You want to have breakfast. You want to be able to catch up and, like, you know, how's life been, Greg? Like, I haven't seen you in the last year.
Yeah.
That's the
it's
same
just
thing.
more of it's just a different atmosphere. It's like being together. You want to be together. You don't want to be in separate rooms. You don't want to have to go through all the BS to get in your room.
Yeah,
you just want to drive up in the driveway and just say, what, you know, and just have fun.
Yeah, with your groceries in your car.
Yeah, people want to cook.
Yeah, with, like, routinely, I'll go by Archer Street. I happen to own property over there, and I'll see people coming in with puzzles. Like, they're putting puzzles together at the kitchen table. Like, these are... This
is sometimes the only times that these people actually get to be together.
That's right. Yeah, like Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Yeah.
Those are all families coming to hang out for, you know, for anyway, but I digress. I mean, again, this is a really complex issue, which is why we take exception with council making these rules and laws or proposing these rules and laws that are not based in fact. They're based in conjecture, opinion, and fear. So we want to make laws that are based in fact, that are fairly applied across all property types. Enforceable.
Yeah.
That's all we're asking for. Seat at the table so we can guarantee that happens for the citizens of Nashville.
Well, thanks for all you do, for your involvement in this. Thanks for everything that you do and put together for this. So, I mean, like I said, it's Nashville.org, Mr. Grant Hammond. Alece Ronzino. Oh my God! I don't know why I do that.
Man, you're almost
if I don't look at it, I know it, and I always get nervous in a quick second.
Too many vowels in there.
But anyway, this is episode 7, Deal Shredders, and thanks for everybody for all you've done. Yeah, thanks again.
So much.